Welcome to the Farm Doc Daily webinar series for the fall. I'm Illinois Extension Farm broadcaster Todd Gleason. Thank you for being with us today. Today's topic, planning on Corn Belt farms for 2023 production. We're joined by Krista Swanson and Gary Schnitkey. Both are in the College of Agricultural, Consumer and Environmental Sciences, Department of Agricultural and Consumer Economics. Over the next hour or so, we'll talk about a series of topics that Krista Swanson will now outline for us. Good morning to you, Krista, and thank you for being online. You're actually on the home farm, I take it, in Knox County.
Yeah, I am. I'm coming on from the farm here today. We were just talking before we started about harvest status, and I said we're probably still a few weeks out in this area of the state. But thanks, Todd, for the introduction. Today, Gary and I are going to be talking about kind of a review of prices and yields and those income components, and then looking ahead to 2023 farm returns outlook. We'll be talking about some decisions to make as we look ahead, long run outlook, talk about margin protection, crop insurance, cash rents, fertility decisions, crop decisions, and marketing decisions. So I'll get us started here, opening up with to set the stage for income and returns discussion that we're going to be having. We're going to start with corn and soybean prices. And these are cash prices for Central Illinois, with soybeans in green and corn in orange. Corn and soybeans both trended higher during a period from about 2007 to 2015. And on our graph, it's labeled as the ethanol build period. But that period is also associated with hey, Gary, if you can go ahead and throw that up. I put in some animations, but Gary's running the slides. So anyway, it's labeled as the ethanol period, but during this period, there were some other demand factors happening. Like, for example, there was also some major growth in soybean exports to China during this time that was influencing soybean price, and, you know, the combination of those things and ethanol influencing those grain prices. We reached some peak levels during that time in 2012. And we also had the drought in there in 2012. And then prices dropped after that period as our growth in ethanol production slowed. So we kind of reached a point where we quit growing as rapidly in production of ethanol. And then we had that plateau period, which kind of continued until we hit the trade conflict in early 2018. And the ups and downs associated with trade news continued really up until the COVID pandemic in early 2020. And during the COVID era, prices grew strongly from about mid-2020 up till mid-2021. And then another spur in prices happened in the months following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In that period, soybeans actually broke that 2012 record, climbing up to $18. And corn came within 50 cents of breaking its price peak from 2012. And then current cash prices right now are $15.84 for soybeans, $6.97 for corn. Again, these are Central Illinois cash prices. And really, this is kind of back to those levels that we were at before the Russian invasion of Ukraine earlier this year. Switching over to yields now, this is Illinois corn yields from 1970 to 2001 with a projection for 2022. And we don't have 23 on here, but trend yield would be roughly about 2 bushels higher going out the next year. So the green line here shows actual yield, and the bluish line represents trend yield for the year. So for 2022, the projection for actual yield is 204 bushels, which would be 5 bushels higher than the 199 bushel per acre trend yield. And then the blue bars at the bottom show actual yield deviations from trend over time. One thing that stood out to me when I looked at this is that really the past few years have had relatively low deviation from yield, or from trend, excuse me, trend yield, as compared to what we've really seen over the last about 50 years here. Gary, do you have any other comments here you'd like to add, or?
No, just that we continue to have good corn yields, and those corn yields even this year, when we've had some bumps around the state, look to be good around the state, and it's likely that Western Illinois will have better yields than, say, Eastern Illinois.
Yeah, we've been in the western part of the state have gotten some. I don't know. I guess we've seemed to have gotten the. We've missed some of the negative weather events, or dryness in some periods and extreme wetness in other periods of this growing season that other regions of the state have had. So will be interesting to see where those yields do come in. Kind of switching the gear to soybean yields. Again, we have soybean actual yields in the green line and that trend yield in the bluish line. And a projection for 2022, which is 64 bushels per acre, which would be higher as well than the trend of 61 bushels per acre. Again, the blue bars at the bottom show actual yield deviations from trend over time. And kind of the same comment that Gary just made is that in this year that's kind of had some unusual weather situations, we still look to have some pretty good yields throughout Illinois. Another factor when we talk about returns is total cost of production. So this graph shows the total dollar cost per acre of producing corn for Northern Illinois. And this is Northern Illinois, but we would see slightly different numbers, but the same pattern if we picked a different region. The non-land costs are shown in orange, and then cash rents are shown in blue, because we do have a lot of cash rented land in Illinois. So that is an important added cost on top of those non-land costs for many farms. The last two bars are 2022 and 2023 projections. Just wanted to clarify, both of those are projections. They are colored and shaded a little bit differently. But in 2021, total costs of production were $900 per acre with that cash rent included. And that jumps up to $1,054 for 2022 and $1,161 per acre for 2003. So there's some pretty significant jumps after about a decade of pretty stable cost of production. Looking at the projection for 2023 compared to 2021, it's about a 30% increase in that total cost of production on cash rented land. So when we combine our expectations for prices and yield with those costs of production, we can calculate operator and land return, which considers all revenue related to the crop. So that in addition to crop sales, that would include crop insurance and government payments. So that's being considered, and then all non-land costs of production. So basically, this is the amount left to pay the operator and to pay land costs. So these bars represent operator and land return for Northern Illinois. Again, we'd see the same pattern if we picked a different region. From 2001 to 2021, again, 2022 and 23 are projected values. So over time, we've seen a lot of variation in this operator and land return. There are some years in which it's fairly large after paying land costs. Those land costs are that blue line, I guess I should say. The blue line represents cash rent values. So you can see on cash rented land, the amount of those dollar shaded bars above the blue line would be the amount left for the operator after paying land costs on cash rented. So in some years, there's quite a bit of bar above the blue line. In other years, about half of the years in the past 2 decades, really that operator and land return was nearly equal to cash rent, meaning after paying cash rent, the farm was basically at a break-even level. So in 2021, we had some strong profit levels, the highest of this 2-decade period. 2022 profits are expected to be lower. That relates with the last slide and those higher costs. But the 2023 projection is concerning because it kind of once again leaves those cash rent operators with very little margin after paying land costs. Though I will say that, again, that's still a projection. So if we had drastic changes in prices from where our projected prices currently are in our budgets, that would, of course, change that. It could change it upwards or downwards. And then kind of taking that per acre value that we were just looking at and translating that to what that means in terms of average net income for a grain farm in Illinois. We can see that 2021 continues to be the high income year for the last 2.5 decades. And then that there is a large decline in net income for 2022 and even more significant drop for 2023. Again, just to emphasize, 22 and 23 are still projections and much could still change. And Gary's going to take it over now and talk about view on long run outlook.
Yeah, and setting this up a bit, the view of the long run outlook, if you're looking at those projections for 2023, that's based on $5.50 corn and $13 soybeans and trend yields. So $5.50 corn, $13 soybeans gets us to $90,000 income for next year. Again, down from this year, partially due to lower prices, partially due to higher costs. So now, as we're moving forward, we got a question for you. And Todd, take this away a little bit, but what do you think the long run price is going to be? And what do you think prices are going to be in 5 years? So
that is the question you've asked. So we're going to take a quick poll of that, Gary. Do you think it'll be below $4 in 5 years? Between $4 and $4.50, between $4.50 and $5.50, $5.50 and $6.50, and over $6.50. Gary, why is it that $5.50 is the midpoint?
Because we had to fit this into six groups, but
it was a limitation.
A lot of method to that 550 madness.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
5 groups. So it was just a limitation. Part of it was a limitation of the number of questions we could ask in the poll. So go ahead and fill that poll out. While you're doing that, I'll remind you that our webinars are sponsored in part with a little financial help from Compeer Financial, Corteva Agri-Sciences, Farm Credit Illinois, FS Growmark, the Illinois Corn Growers Association, the Illinois Soybean Association, and of course the TIAA, Center for Farmland Research. Let's see what the results look like. So most of you do not think we'll have a $4 or below cash price. 21% between $4 and $4.50. Most of you do think that it'll be between $4.50 and $5.50, and then it kind of looks like a natural bell curve. I think you put those numbers in the right place, apparently, Gary.
Yeah. So most of us think sort of $4.50 to $5.50. I'm going to give you a view of that from USDA, and just to set this up a bit, from 2006 to 2020, we've had an average price of $4.22. The way agricultural commodities typically work is you have a long period where prices vary around a plateau. That was $2.40 before 2006, from 1973 to 2006. Now we're at $4.22. So going out in the future, what USDA and Congressional Budget Office are doing, and those two are sort of related, we have high prices for 2022. Those prices then are coming down in 2023. And USDA and CBO are driving those prices back to $4 for corn. And they would be doing $10 for soybeans. So what USDA and CBO are doing is saying we're going to go back to that long run average of 420 or something along that line. So their view in their models, and probably more their view, is that those prices will sort of be in that go back to that long run plateau, and we have not changed that plateau. Personally, I suspect, like most of you, that those long run prices are higher than $4 and $10 for soybeans. I would probably be in that 450 to 550 range where most of you are at. I would be basing that on the fact that we've had much higher inflation in recent times, and the world is an uncertain pace. And I guess I'm betting on that uncertainty continuing into the future. Again, where it is though in that 450 to 550 range is an open question, and it matters a lot. But if you're believing it's in that 450 to 550 range, you're sort of saying 5. Well, if you're looking at our break-even prices now, they're at 5 for corn and roughly 13 for soybeans, 12.50, 13 for soybeans, and that leads us to the adjustments in the future. But even if you do believe that, we will have prices near or below $4 and $10 sometime in the future, and so and again, that's just the nature of commodity prices. If we believe the long run price is $5, you will have $4 corn. So that eventuality must be considered. And by the way, we're getting to the point where, that on a percentage basis, those dollar values mean a lot. For 2023, and again, we could see large price changes between now and February. And there's nothing that would say that that's out of the range of possibility. We will begin to feel much more confident about 2023 when we get to February and set those projected prices for crop insurance. If they're in that $5 range, and close to $6, which is sort of where you would think they would be given prices now, 2023 has a really good chance of being a good year, and the downside risk are reduced. Again, that happens once we set those crop insurance prices. And again, you're going to see some of our recommendations here color that. And that also leads to an option that we do now have available, and that is margin protection crop insurance. Actually, we've had that for a couple of years. And Krista is going to discuss that a little bit.
Okay. So I talked earlier about the rising costs of production. And really, I think as we think about 2023, given the change in prices over the past year in some of our major inputs, that is something we want to take into account. So margin protection crop insurance is a policy that accounts for some of those important costs of productions, unlike some of the more traditional insurance options that are more familiar, which are revenue or yield protection type of policies that don't consider those costs. So looking at this slide here, showing several of the fertilizer and inputs as well as diesel. And again, like I said, we can see how those prices have changed so significantly in the past year. And so looking at those, now is the time of year when many farmers are pricing ahead or going ahead and prepaying for some of these fertilizer and fuel inputs. This will make more sense in a minute here as I talk a little bit more about margin protection, but the solid lines are the inputs that are actually considered in the margin protection crop insurance program. But also included on this slide is anhydrous ammonia and 28% nitrogen, because urea is the nitrogen component used in margin protection, but anhydrous ammonia and 28% are both forms of nitrogen, which are pretty widely used by farmers. And so one thing I wanted to point out here is that urea is that blue solid line and anhydrous ammonia is that pink dotted line. And we can see that from 2018 until 2021, those lines were fairly close together. We've seen urea rise in the past year, but not as proportionally significant as that rise in anhydrous ammonia, which again is important because urea is the component being used in margin protection, while anhydrous ammonia is what a lot of farmers are purchasing. Margin protection, a few basics about this is that it has a September 30th sales closing date for 2023. So if this is something you're interested in, now is when you need to be talking to your crop insurance agent. This is quite different than the sales closing date for other types of crop insurance options. So again, what this coverage offers is coverage against an unexpected decrease in operating margin. So that payment is based on a change in margin, a change from an expected margin level and a harvest margin, which is based on a revenue component minus cost components over a specified period. And these payments can be triggered by increases in input costs. They can be triggered by decreases in revenue that are caused by lower price and or yield, or a combination of the revenue side and the input side. I do want to point out that this does not provide risk protection, margin risk protection at the individual farm level. It is an area plan, and it uses county level estimates of average revenue and input costs. Like Gary just noted, we can reduce some of our downside risk when we have projected prices being set for crop insurance. So one thing that makes margin protection attractive as we think about 2023 is, of course, the fact that there is a input cost component, but also the fact that the price setting period for projected price just ended yesterday. The projected price setting period took place from August 15th through September 14th. So those prices for this particular policy are already locked in at the prices that we've seen over the past month. This table right here shows us when prices are set. So like I just said, the projected prices are all set from August 15th to September 14th. Corn and soybean price use November and December CME futures contracts. The inputs are also using CME futures. The May contract is being used for diesel, diammonium phosphate, and urea. And the November contract is being used for interest. And potash is set a little bit differently. It's considered an input subject to change, but it actually does not change. The harvest price is set in October using the same futures contract as expected price. That is October of 2023. The harvest price will be set for corn and soybeans. For those inputs, April 1st to 30th of 2023 is when the harvest price will be set, and the interest harvest price will not be set until October of 2023. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of for each of these components, what that frame is for changes in margin. And I want to also note that we provide much more information on margin protection in a couple recent articles. If you look at the most recent one, September 6th, 2022, you will find a link to the August 30th and September 8th, 2017 article. All three of these would be great resources for someone considering margin protection. So quickly, a few benefits and constraints to using this. You may want to consider it because of the early projected price period. So again, that ended yesterday. So the corn price is $6 and the soybean price is $13.55. Gary mentioned a few minutes ago that the price that we're using for 2023 in our budgets is $5.50 for corn and $13 for soybeans. So this is an opportunity to lock in a projected price on the revenue side of this equation that is higher than what we're using in our budgets right now. So that seems like a pretty good floor on revenue, given what we know right now, or I shouldn't say on revenue, on the price component. A few constraints on its usefulness. So the futures contracts for corn and soybeans are very heavily traded. The contracts for DAP and urea are quite thinly traded, and we explain why that's a concern a little bit more in those articles. But basically, there's just not a lot of those contracts out there, and we sometimes go long periods without even having a single trade. So there's just not near as much action as what we're used to seeing if you're studying the corn and soybeans futures market. Potash, like I mentioned, it's an input subject to price change, but it actually does not change. And in a year like last year, potash price changed quite significantly. If you jump back and look at the graph we have up there, you can see that, but that wasn't captured in this margin calculation. And then nitrogen component used is urea. I mentioned that earlier. Corn and soybean farms tend to buy more anhydrous ammonia, and there's a price variance that differs between the two. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Gary to talk about cash rent decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Krista. And again, you're looking at a $6 projected price for corn and $13.55 price, and that's something that you could get crop insurance price located at now if you're using margin protection. We're going to turn to cash rents, and we do have another poll question for you. This is sort of a backdrop for all the economic outlook for 2023, and so we want to see what you think. So
here's the poll question, Gary. By the spring of 2023, do you think that what will happen with the Ukraine-Russia war? There are 4 answers this time. It'll end and they'll reach a peace agreement. They'll continue much as they are at this point. Russia will gain the upper hand but still be fighting, or Ukraine will gain the upper hand and will still be fighting. Go ahead and fill that out. I remind you that if you have questions for either Gary or for Krista, you can put those into the question box and we'll get them answered either as we go along or as we finish up our programming. That question box either is over on the left-hand side of the page or down at the bottom, depending on how big of a desktop you're looking at or whatever size screen you happen to have. And you can just fill it out and we'll see those. It's in the gray boxes, either to the left or down to the bottom of the page. So let's take a look at this poll and see what everybody says. 7% of you say it'll end and we'll reach a peace agreement. 58%, overwhelming number, continue much as it is now. And surprisingly, 22%, well, I don't know about surprisingly, but 22% are going with Ukraine. Ukraine will gain the upper hand and keep hold of it. So that's where we are there. And then, Gary, on that note, we get to turn our attention to cash rents. And you've done an article about this, and we'll talk about it on the radio this afternoon. Thank you, by the way, for doing that interview. But why don't you go through some of the cash rents in the state of Illinois?
Yeah, and again, we're looking at cash rent decisions moving forward. We have the Ukraine-Russian war in the background, and that is actually going to make our inputs probably not come down, but probably also keep uncertainty in the market and our commodity prices higher. What we're seeing in cash rents is you're looking at a map on the right-hand side of the screen with data from NASC on average cash rents per county. And we had to fill in some counties this year because of missing data, but we made some estimates of that here at the University of Illinois. All of those rents pretty much increased from 2021. And if you're looking at those rents across county, and again, these are averages, they went up by $30 per acre. So across the state, if you're looking at 2021 rents and compare them to 2022, all of those average cash rents went up $30 an acre, which is really a large increase. It's something that we don't typically see. Again, the variability across the state, $331 per acre is the winner of that is Piatt and Moultrie County. Those two are adjacent to each other in east central Illinois, and our lowest is $53 in Pope County. Those have a high degree of relationship, or if you look at the corn yields or soil productivity index, the higher the soil productivity index, the higher the rent. And similarly, a higher average corn yield, the higher the rent. We broke that down a little bit just to show you how those would be by productivity classes. We divided those up by excellent, good, average, fair productivity classes with a soil productivity indexes that range. Excellent productivity has 133 to 147. This happens to be the same ranking or land class division that the Illinois Society of Professional Farm Managers use. But excellent productivity land had 211 bushels per acre, an average corn yield from 2017 to 2021. That goes down to 204 for good, 190 for average, and 142 for fair. Between 2021 and 2022, excellent productivity land had an average cash rent of $277 in 2021 and $314 in 2022, and that was an increase, again, $37. So the excellent productivity went up $37. Counties with, on average, good soil productivity index went up $23, 30 for average, and fair went up 36. So those are average cash rents. Those are reported by USDA. We also have another source of data, and that is the Illinois Society of Professional Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. They release their rents every year as well. For 2021 and 2022, you can see that they went from 309 for excellent productivity land to 369, or $69 increase. We have seen in recent years that Illinois Society has had higher cash rents than the average. You can think about that in a number of ways. We've seen rents or farmland returns increase more, and the professional managers understand that and keep up with those rents, maybe more than some in other areas. And it might also indicate something about the farm owner's desires. But anyway, Illinois Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers have an increase from 2021 to 22 of $69 per acre. So we saw, again, all those rents went up. The Illinois Society had those rents go up quite a bit. Again, we're looking at those rents go up. So we also asked, the Illinois Society asked what they thought would happen for 2023 rents, and they saw those go up as well, but less than they did from 21 to 2022. $17 for excellent productivity land, 14 for good, 9 for average, and 8 for fair. Those, and again, those 2023 are survey values, and they are actually somewhat, if you just looked at where cash rents, or excuse me, farm prices are, commodity prices, returns, you sort of would expect that. It's also important to note that cash rents tend to lag a little bit what farm returns are doing. Here are some suggestions. Come back next week for our webinar on farmland prices in an interesting time. And we will talk more about those rents and where those are going. So we'll spend more time talking about those rental rates. Bruce Sherrick and Luke Worrell will be here for that discussion, as well as I. There is going to be continued upward pressure on cash rents. And again, if you're looking at where those returns are, you would expect that. And the other thing that I would also note is that when we're saying there's upward pressure, that also depends where your current rent level is. Again, there's a lot of variability in rent levels out there. And if you're at the high end, there's probably less of a push to increase those rents into 2023. I would also suggest that we remember we have not set projected prices. And again, for crop insurance, we have not set those projected prices, which is done in February. We have an opportunity to use margin protection to set those prices now. But most of the policies are set in February, and that will be the same this year. And until we set those projected prices, we don't have a floor under revenue. And again, we are at elevated cost levels. We sort of have some concerns about where long run prices are going to be. So all of that suggests, some caution and sometime in the future, probably not 2023, but sometime in the future, we're going to be looking at lower projected or lower commodity prices. And then we're going to have to deal with adjustments in cost, and cash rents is one of those costs that we are likely to have to adjust. So now, cash rents likely going up. Let's look at where the relative profitability of corn and soybean are. And Krista, you want to look at this one?
Okay, so here we have the reddish colored bars on the top side are the corn advantage, the years in which corn had an advantage and the relative advantage that it had over soybeans, and the green bars on the bottom represent those years in which soybeans had an advantage. And so I think that, we can see here that from about 2013 to 19, we had soybeans clearly with quite a few years in a row with the advantage. And then in recent years, corn's had that returns advantage. As we look to 2023, again, as we've emphasized throughout, it is a projection, but given trend yields and those prices that we are using for corn and soybeans in the 2023 budgets as of right now, plus where we expect costs to be as of now, there's not really a clear advantage as far as demand for acres in the corn versus soybeans discussion. Right now, it looks like corn has an advantage of just a few dollars over soybeans. And we're going to talk about that a bit more, looking into some numbers here on the next slide. But 2023 projected returns are positive, but they're lower than what we've seen in the past few years. Costs are higher in all categories in 2023. We can see here, looking at those red lines for direct costs and power costs and overhead costs, those numbers are, I guess we're just showing 2023 budgets right here, but if you pull up our revenue and cost publication and look at that compared to 2022, you'll see that all of those are expected to be higher. Again, as we've kind of talked already, when we add in a cash rented land cost, of course, on owned land cost is going to be your real estate taxes, and it'll be considerably lower than cash rent. But again, because we have so much cash rented land in Illinois, on that cash rented land, there will be little room for profits, whether you're planting corn or soybeans. If we see prices end up lower than current projections. And again, there's not really a clear winner in the battle for corn versus soybean acres, given these current projections. I will note that the break-even costs to cover non-land costs, the break-even price for corn to cover non-land costs is $3.93. And if you add in cash rent costs, that bumps up to $5.30 for corn. And again, like Gary has said a few times, and I did when I talked about margin protection, margin protection offers an opportunity to go ahead and lock in that price point at a higher level than that. And as of right now, maybe that'll still be true when the price is set in February for other crop insurance options, but that's still an unknown at this point. For soybeans, that break-even price to cover non-land costs is $7.91. And if you add cash rent into that, the break-even bumps up to $12.54. Now, I want to also talk about wheat. So the market is signaling wheat demand in 2023 prices. So right now I'm showing this 2023 crop budgets for Southern Illinois. And if we jump down to that bottom line of operator and land return and look at those values for corn after soybeans, soybeans after corn in the second column, In the third and fourth column, there's wheat and double crop soybeans, and then in the final column is the sum of wheat and double crop soybeans, assuming those are used with each other. And winter wheat followed by double crop soybeans provides a greater opportunity for positive returns. The operator and land return is greater than either corn or soybeans individually for 2023 in our current budgets. Wheat is not that common outside of Southern Illinois, but I did want to mention, and this is in our budgets, but the combination of wheat and double crop soybeans also has higher projected returns in Central Illinois high productivity land than corn or soybeans by itself. So if you are in that Central Illinois area, obviously doing wheat requires some different management practices, and it may not be something that everyone is just set up to do or wants to take on. But if you have the machinery and time resources to do so in Central Illinois, and are something maybe to think about for 2023. And again, in Southern Illinois, the signals are definitely there that that is an option offering greater returns at this point than corn or soybeans. And then it looks like our next up we have talking about some fertility decisions, and looks like we have a poll question, Todd.
Indeed, we do. Let's start right in on that poll question. In fact, this question is about anhydrous ammonia, the price. In the spring of 2023, they want to know what you think the price will be. Anhydrous price ammonia in the spring of 2023 will be over $1,500 a ton, between $1,250 and $1,500, between $1,000 and $1,250, $750 and $1,000, or below $750 a ton. So anhydrous ammonia for the April of 2023. So next spring, what do you expect that the price will be? I'll remind you, as we're getting through those poll answers from you, that coming up in November on the 21st at the Farm Assets Conference, we'll talk a lot about fertilizer. Gary Schnitkey will take up prospects for the budgets, for crop budgets for both corn and soybeans, wheat too, I suppose, at that time. And we'll also hear from Josh Linville, who is the StoneX fertilizer expert. He'll come in from Kansas City. We'll have more information on that soon enough. So here are your answers. Anhydrous ammonia, most of you believe it will be between $1,000 and $1,500 total. The large that's a large $500 range, but between those two, that's the numbers you're coming up with. And I'm wondering what all of that might mean, Gary Schnitkey, going forward as we look at the price of fertilizer for the next season and what you know about it historically.
Yeah, so we have a predominant amount of people in that sort of the $1,000 to $1,500 range. I would note this is a slide that shows anhydrous ammonia, DAP, and potash going back. We were over $1,600 here in May, so we have actually come down some in recent time. And anhydrous ammonia now is sitting sort of at that $1,244 range. If we look at where we've seen fall bids for anhydrous ammonia, they were sort of in the $1,150 per ton range, and now are sort of in the $1,250 per ton range. Again, the individuals that I've talked to note that that's high, but it could have been higher. Maybe that $1,600 price caused us to be used to $1,250. But I would also note that if we went back last year to this time, we would be booking somewhere those prices between $750 and $800. And I don't believe, we have 0% of you that believe that we're going to get below $750. So we're sort of here at $1,250. The question is, should we wait till spring or just book it now? and we don't really have a good feel for that. I mean, the world is so uncertain right now. One thing I would note is that there's going to be upward pressure placed on that as long as we have Western Europe facing natural gas shortages. And again, that area of the world is looking to a cold winter. Russia does not appear to be willing to provide Western Europe with all of its natural gas needs, and that is going to have a large impact on natural gas and nitrogen prices from those Western Europe sources. And so, as that is a backdrop, I would agree with everybody here that we're not going to see likely to see prices get anywhere below $1,000 per ton, and it could go up to $1,500 per ton and over if we have any sort of additional problems there. And you can list those on a day-by-day basis. One of the things that we would suggest you do is in the fertility space is first check your soil test levels and don't apply if you're much above the suggested levels. Illinois Agronomy Handbook would sort of have those ranges 40 to 50 pounds per acre, and that would be a Bray P soil test. So if we're above that, 60, 70, 80, this might be the year just to let her go and wait till next year and see what happens. I know that has some complications on cash rent farmland because of utilizing soil test that is already there. But again, if we've built up that soil test level and we don't see any adverse impacts, which is what the agronomist here at the U of I would say, milk it in this high price environment. And again, potassium is in the $260 to $300 range. The other thing that we would note is that the 2023 MRTN recommendations, and this was taken yesterday, shows those for corn following soybeans, actual N in the 160 for Northern Illinois, 169 for Central, and 188 for Southern Illinois. And that be actual N. That was done at a $5.50 corn price, $12.50 anhydrous ammonia price. Again, and our results from PCM would agree with the agronomist here that those are the profit maximizing levels. If we get above that, we may be getting yield, but the nitrogen cost outweigh the additional yield. Again, we see most of our profitable operations sort of within 20 to 30 pounds up or down from those MRTNs. So if we're coming into this year, it might be time to move. If we're above it, some farmers are above it, move back to those levels. And again, we see those levels being the profit maximizing alternative. Again, we would say that we have a cloudy situation, but that's where we're seeing those prices are at now. We supposedly have a solution to the rail strike, which we had noted here, but took it off this morning. That will likely have some downward pressure. But here's the big thing. If you're going to lock in those nitrogen at $1,250 per ton, also lock in some of the corn price. We're still, if you look at fall bids for 2023, $12.50, you can make a profit at those prices, and you do get concerned about buying that high nitrogen now and then seeing those prices decline into the future. So let's price some of that now and lock in those prices. Again, that's not necessarily saying that we won't see higher prices in next year, but there is also a very good possibility of having lower prices, which then brings us to our final topic, marketing. And we would say that there is a risk of price declines, and I would say it's large. And that's particularly large until we set those projected prices in February. So as farmers are making those decisions, setting cash rents, setting purchasing inputs, let's also think about perhaps I would encourage thinking about doing more pre-harvest marketing this year rather than last, because again, we have elevated risk levels. So to summarize here, 2023 actually does look like a good income year. We have higher costs though, and we do have some concerns in the long run where these long run prices are going. You do have the option of MP margin protection this year's. We're likely to see cash rents go up, but again, there are risks. And if you're looking at cropping decisions, corn and soybeans look to be in at roughly the same levels. And let's keep our fertility rates at those university recommended levels. And if you're above those soil test levels, maybe think about just writing it out this year. So, Todd, we have come close to the end of this.
We are approaching the end of our time together. I will take you back to the MRTN, and you don't have to go back here, Gary, but to that MRTN slide so that you can find it easily online. I suspect many of you are thinking, where did he come up with that? It's easy to find. Just in Google, in the search engine, whatever you're using, type in rate calculator and it will pop up. It's an Iowa State website. However, it has the in rates for all the states in the North Central region. And we're pretty proud here at Illinois that we have more site years by, I want to say double, than any other state. Emerson Knapziger has done a great job over the decades of making sure that the nitrogen rate studies are really up to speed. So if you want to find that, you can do it easily. Just put into your search engine in rate calculator, and it allows you to put in the price of grain, the price of anhydrous ammonia, and it will drop out a pounds per acre that is recommended. It's pretty quick and simple and easy to use. A reminder coming up next week, we'll continue this fall webinar series from the Farm Doc Daily folks. Bruce Sherrick will be here along with Luke Worrell. I suppose Gary Schnitkey will be back as well. And if you read the paragraph here, there is something that has happened in this paragraph that is almost unheard of in the world of agricultural economics. They have used phenomenal as a adjective to describe the rate of increase in the past year of farmland prices. So you want to be here next week at 11 a.m. You're already signed up for this, so you'll get an email on that one. And then the following week, Krista Swanson will be back along with Jonathan Koppas. They'll take us through the Inflation Reduction Act. There's actually a lot in that as it relates to farm policy, and you'll want to be here for that as well. So those are two things to keep in mind over the next couple of weeks. And you'll get reminders from the Farm Doc Daily team. Speaking of reminders, our Farm Doc Daily webinars are sponsored by TIA Centers for Farmland Research. That's on the University of Illinois campus at farmland.illinois.edu. Compeer Financial, Corteva AgriScience, Farm Credit Illinois, the Illinois Soybean Association, the Illinois Corn Growers Association, and FS Growmark. Of course, the educational partners include the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences, University of Illinois Extension, and the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics, along with FBFM. That's the Illinois Farm Business Farm Management Service. As we wrap up our time together, I see we do have one question from the folks. Are you recommending crop contracts with bonus for good years? If so, what is a good split on well-drained land? So why don't you take a crack at that one, Gary Schnitkey, and then and as he's doing that, I'll remind you that you can always find the archive of this webinar very, very soon. Jim Balch, who's behind the scenes, does a great job of getting these up on the archive at farmdocdaily.illinois.edu under webinars, or just look under youtube.com/farmdocvideo. That's down there in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can subscribe and see all kinds of things. So, Gary, what's the answer you've come up with?
Yeah. By the way, the note on phenomenal farmland price rise, I wrote that, and I've never used phenomenal before, but it has been a large increase in the past year.
I saw it, Gary. I didn't know whether you wrote that or not.
Yeah, I did. And ag economists don't use phenomenal very often, or I don't use phenomenal very often. So crop contracts. So I'm assuming that this relates to rental arrangements, and we're talking about a variable cash rent arrangement here. typically, and we've done this analysis where we look at variable cash rents and what is the percent of the gross revenue or crop revenue, which would be farm yield times measure price. And we've looked at that back over time. And if you look at average cash rents, a 31% share on corn and a 41% share on soybeans would get you equal to the cash rent. So if you want to have a little bit more return than a typical cash rent, you would go a little bit higher than that. And if you want lower than that, you would go lower than that. But the benchmark what we put out is 31% for corn revenue, 41% for soybean revenue will get you at the cash rent level. We would also say on those variable cash rents, you need a meaningful lower rent level. That is so that Farm Service Agency, FSA, treats it as a cash rent, and that's something $200 to $250 per acre. You could also put a higher end in there as well, so that that compensates for the fact that you're putting a lower end as well. Again, we will delve more into those rental arrangements at our next Thursday webinar, and you should also be looking at for next week for an article on variable cash rents to be appearing on Farm Doc Daily on Tuesday. So that's a very good question that we'll didn't anticipate having done for today, but that's a very good question.
All right. Hey, thank you very much, Gary. Gary Schnitkey and Krista Swanson have joined us on this first of the 6 fall 2022 Farm Doc Daily webinars. You're already subscribed to them. Thank you if you watched us live. Thank you if you're watching us after the fact. Jim Baltz is behind the scenes. Thanks to him for making sure everything went so smoothly today. And you have a very, very good day. I'm Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.